Tell me when you see me, Jan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Phase 1.
Okay. So it's a simple process where the operator of the ticketing system just sees the ticket and decides that, okay, do I want to automate this upload or not? If he says yes, we move to next step. When the Blue Prism checks if there's a duplicate, if we already created this data or processed this form, and we also check that attachment is named in the right way. If everything is okay and there's no duplicate, we move to next step of the process. In this sub workflow, we actually start the Winshuttle process, and it's here. There's also sub process that prepares the launch of Winshuttle software. And the key value we bring to this process in SAP integration is actually the things that you cannot see here. Or every step that we need for the integration is in this object. And in case of simple upload, it might look like this. So we just use the Winshuttle runner to run data in the SAP. As you know, with Winshuttle, you can change the scripts and read data from the SAP, read data from the log files, use Excel formulas. So in practice, you can build the whole integration, all the transactions, if you need more, to the single Excel form. So we first run a transaction with script with multiple SAP screens. After that, we start next, we read something from the SAP, and every step of the SAP integration, even complex one, is here on this one Excel. So in the way you might think it's, or imagine it, imagine it to be if you would start doing it in a Blue Prism or any other RPA tool, it would need very complex workflow with a lot of if conditions and so on. One thing I want to point out here is that when this process was created, the author actually recorded the user interface of the Winshuttle runner. We will soon show you some other ways also that you can utilize Winshuttle with these processes, which are perhaps a bit more robust than this. The last step in the process, the last sub-process, is that we just retrieve the log file and put it back to the Blue Prism log. And we also check that we need to check that Winshuttle has actually stopped running, and we might need extra time to finish before we can close the process. Okay, Jan, are you ready? Can you make yourself a presenter?
Okay, let's see.
Or I'll make you.
Yeah, you must accept.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, so can you see the PowerPoint, Thomas?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, good. All right, so, and you can still see it. Can you see me switching to the second page? Just checking.
Yes, you do it.
Okay, good.
I did.
Okay, good. All right, so this presentation is not a presentation which is covering Winshuttle basic functionality. We are concentrating on different ways to integrate with Winshuttle. So, and this could be part of your RPA solution, but RPA is not necessary. I mean, this applies for any applications or processes or scripts or whatever you have. So we're looking at different ways that you can benefit or utilize Winshuttle in different environments. So we are not just looking at the basic use of the transaction Excel stuff and things like that, but more from a slightly different point of view. So I will be looking at a couple of Winshuttle features and different interfaces and data formats supported by Winshuttle. And at the end of the presentation, there is also some added solutions provided by ADSOTECH. If I just briefly start first with thinking about process automation in general. So we can basically identify like 3 different layers here. First of all, we have some kind of process control or process flow, some kind of logic to control the application or the process. Then we have some kind of integration to different systems or to different data. And then at the bottom here we have the actual data or actions. We might have different databases, scripts, web services, manual actions, and stuff like that. So in this presentation, we will be looking at some different ways that you can utilize Winshuttle in an environment like this, and see what options exist. And I'm going to cover or talk about 3 different scenarios. The first one is SAP integration in a Winshuttle workgroup environment. So this means basically that you have the base Winshuttle product. You have maybe transaction or query. So you have the studio or the desktop product in use. So we're looking at what capabilities exist with that product. And then the second thing is SAP integration in a Winshuttle Foundation environment. So if you have the whole Winshuttle server, the foundation set up, you will have some additional options to integrate with SAP. And the last scenario is the workflow integration in the Winshuttle Foundation environment. So we have the Winshuttle workflow, and we will be looking at different options exists in that case. So we will start with SAP integration in a workgroup environment. So this means that we're looking at things that you have when you have purchased the basic Winshuttle product. So if you have it now, you are probably using it to upload data from Excel to SAP, or maybe retrieve data from SAP to Excel in various transactions. So that's the starting point, and that's the typical way of using the product to manually enter the data or to execute the data against the SAP from Excel, for example. But if we look at some different options, how you can utilize these scripts in different environments, let's have a look at those different options here. And the first thing I will be mentioning is you have the possibility to schedule Winshuttle scripts. So if you have created a transaction script or a query script, you have a relating Excel file, and you want to execute the script against this Excel file, maybe at a later stage, or maybe it's a big mass load with lots of data and you want to execute it in the evening or something like that. What you can do is you can simply schedule the job from your desktop. So you will define that, okay, this job will be executed tonight at 10 o'clock, for example. You also have the possibility to schedule recurring tasks, so you can define that this should be executed every day or every week or something like that. Because if you're scheduling it to execute, for example, every week, you can still change the input Excel or the output Excel, whatever, the content of that in between. So you have single schedule, but it will be using the same data file. So that's, of course, provides unattended execution. You don't have to be by the workstation when you're executing the load. Here are shown some print screens of how you do the scheduling. It's pretty straightforward. So when you're in studio, you have opened the script, and then you just click on the schedule. This is, by the way, Winshuttle 11. So if you have an earlier version, it might look a bit different. But then when you press the schedule, you will select the system, and you have some options to send an email when it finishes, if you like. You can also attach the data file with the email. So you can, for example, send an email to a group of people or to yourself that when the execution has completed. And then you also can specify the exact schedule. So you have the same scheduling options that you have in Windows Task Manager as well. And you can here define exactly how you want this or when you want this to be executed. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention here. And the second thing is that you have a possibility to execute scripts via the command line. So instead of opening an Excel file and from the add-in execute something, or opening Winshuttle Studio and opening an Excel file and executing something from there, what you can do is you can simply execute a script from the command line. So you just have to enter one command to run the complete script. So this, of course, makes it easier to integrate this part with other processes. So let's say you have some other process which is doing other things, and then at some point you want to execute this Winshuttle script, so you can just call a single command. You could put it in, for example, in a bat file if you like, and execute it from there. It will then take care of the execution, and this can also send an email if you so like, and you don't have to be by the workstation when it's happening. So here is an example of a command line of one command. I will not go through all the details. I will show you. I will actually demonstrate this here soon. And but basically, what you see here, you have one single command, and you can provide here, for example, the script file name, and you can provide the Excel file name. And here we also have an email option, so I'm sending an email to myself when execution has been completed. If you have a query script, for example, then you can also provide query parameters as part of this command, which is quite handy because you can then in that way define what data you want to have read from SAP just by providing it here as a parameter. Okay, so that was the command line. The third thing is, as Thomas mentioned also earlier, we have the script chaining. Script chaining means that you have, for example, one Excel file and you have multiple scripts that you want to execute against that same data. So this is also, of course, something that can be useful when you want to automate things. And the last thing here is you have the possibility to invoke scripts from VBA, and I'm not saying that you should do this. Many companies don't want to do that because they don't want to use macros, but it's an additional option, and especially if you are let's say that you are using macros anyway, and you have maybe some macros that is preparing the data in Excel, maybe reading multiple Excel files and maybe validating against SAP, and then finally post data to SAP. So what you can do is then, if you like, you can call the Winshuttle from the VBA, so you don't have to separately execute the script. You can have it part of your macro. So that's one option you can use. And of course, if you have a RPA solution and if you're working in Excel, you have possibility also to call this from RPA because it supports VBA probably, and so just another option. And what I'm going to show here is in the first quick demo is I'm just going to show first a very small execution of a command line or command line execution. So we will be executing a transaction script via the command line. And then the second demo here is slightly more involved. There is some scripting that has been built here. It's collecting multiple input Excel files, and then we are uploading that to SAP. So we're basically taking all Excel files from one folder. That could be like it could be a network folder, or for example, where you're collecting lots of files, and then for example, at the end of the day, this will be loaded to SAP. So let's have a look at the demo at this point, and I'll start with the command line execution. And I have here in this script folder, I have 3 files. I have a transaction script, then I have an Excel file, and then I have a batch file to execute the load. I'll just quickly open the Excel file. It's just a FP50 data, and as you can see, there is no log field information, so this has not been loaded to SAP yet. And then we have, I can save that, and then we have here in the bat file, I have the command to execute this, so I can just briefly show that. It's a long command, but once you get it right, then it shouldn't be too difficult to change some of the parameters here. So here we have the name of the script, and then we have the name of the Excel file, and we have the email option, and so forth. So I'm just going to start that execution by double-clicking on this batch file. So we're just running it like that. I could, of course, also execute it by opening the command line. It doesn't matter, it's the same thing. So now what happens is that this script starts, and there is like a small window opened here, and you can basically follow here what's happening, but you don't have to do anything here. The script execution is fairly slow because we have our SAP somewhere very far, and it's quite slow, so it takes a bit of time, but once we get started, it should be okay. So it takes a few seconds here in the beginning because it's loading all kinds of things. It's loading some studio stuff and loading Excel probably, and all kinds of things. So it takes a little bit of time, but then once it starts to run, it goes a little bit quicker. So this is now running that input file, and the record number, that's the number of the header files in this case. And it says, okay, here that there were 6 succeeded rows and no rows failed. So if I go to my email, I should get here an email, and now I got it right away here. So if I open that, we can see here that I got a message. It says here that's the script file, that's the Excel file, and that's successfully rows 6 and no errors. And the Excel file is included as an attachment here. And of course, this is nice. I can now check here that everything went well. So that's one way to run a script. And I'm going just jump directly to the second example here, which is slightly more complex. In this case, I have multiple files here, multiple input Excel files, and actually all of these files, they have one or more rows of data. So this actually has 3 postings, and it varies a little bit from file to file. But basically the idea here is that we could have any number of Excel files here, and then when I go here to execute the script to load this data, there is actually a PowerShell script which doing some things first here, and it's just collecting all those files and into one file. So what we're doing is we're actually combining the Excel file content, and then we're running the upload for that resulting file. It would be even easier to just run all the input files separately. That would mean that we would get 5 different emails. So that could be basically done with just with a simple bat file with a few lines of code. This is a bit more complex now because we are combining the Excel content, but it's just to get an idea or to give you an idea that this is the type of things that you could do, for example, with Winshuttle. And of course, it requires a little bit of coding in this case, but equally well, you could do this with a robot. You could do the preparing step with a robot, and then in the end, you can just have Winshuttle upload the resulting file. So you could do those kinds of things. And again, this is just doing the same thing. It's now just running a slightly bigger file, and once this is executed, it will upload this data to, or it will send an email to me again. And we can see here, well, it should be done very soon, and I can just open my email. It should be coming up here very quickly now, I think. And yeah, okay, there were no errors there either, so it was all okay, and we should get an email with that, and there were no errors, and that's input file is here as well, so we can open that one. And what I did was here in this script also, when we're combining the files, what I did was I just put here an Excel or a column in Excel to indicate the file, the originating file, so we can see if there was some problem. We can see to try to pinpoint the problem later on. So it has been added there by the script. So in case there would be some error, so that not all of the rows would be okay. I think I had something here. Let's see. Yeah. So in this case, we would get just like a number of errors, number of successful rows. So that's what you get in the email then, and then you would see some error here, and of course you would then have to do something to fix that situation. Okay, but that's the very first demo. So let me just jump back to the PowerPoint and continue a little bit here. And the next thing is we will be looking at what are the different or additional integration options to SAP in case you have the full Winshuttle Foundation environment. And there are some interesting additions to the things that have been presented here so far. So let's go back to this. And when you have the foundation, you will have support for additional data formats. So you're not restricted to Excel or, well, Access is also part of the initial or part of the work group, but the other things are not part of the basic product. So there are things that you get with the foundation, and I'll just show you here a little bit more in detail what this means. And first of all, before I go to the different data formats, When you have Foundation, you have an additional option to also execute scripts on the server, so you can make server schedules. And of course, the benefit here is that you don't need to have the workstation reserved. You can, if you have a very long running script, you can say that, okay, run this on the server, run it now, or run it at a later stage, and it will then be run at the on the server, and it will be also stored on the server, the resulting file, and you can get an email notification from that as well. So that's an additional benefit you get with the Foundation. And second thing here is that in the Foundation version, and then when you have the Winshuttle query, you have the possibility to export data to additional targets. So you can export data to SQL Server and to SharePoint lists. You can do it, for example, you can set up to run, for example, every day or week or however often you need to do it. So this is something that that we do in those cases where customer wants to have some SAP data available in different environments without connecting those environments to SAP directly. So this is something that we are using in our Winshuttle workflow solution, but you could equally well use this in any when you have any requirements. So you have whatever application that needs some data from SAP. So this is especially useful in cases where you need to have access to some more static type of data. Here I have mentioned things like country codes in SAP, tax codes, profit centers, commodity codes, and stuff like that. These are typical things that our customers do. So they schedule this information, this job, and it's placing the data in SharePoint list or in SQL Server, and then it's quite easy to use from some other environment. And the third thing here is a very interesting thing and something which provides a lot of possibilities, and that's the fact that when you have built a Winshuttle script with transaction or with query, you can publish that script as a web service. So it will be, you can publish it as a standard SOAP web service, and this of course means that you can then provide a very easy way to integrate with SAP from basically any application. So if you are building whatever script or application or RPA solution, you will have always the possibility to consume web services from that, and this provides the possibility. So this is a quite important thing, because you can then benefit from the Winshuttle goodies that you have when you have the possibilities to record all kinds of transactions, or you can make queries. You can join several tables and define queries, and then you can very simply, when you have done that, you can make it into a web service. And you can even if you have, let's say you have some BAPIs or remote function calls, you can use those in Winshuttle transaction, and then you can make a web service out of that as well. So you get a very easy interface, something that is very easy to build without any programming, and then you have something that you can use in a very easy way. Here I have shown some screens just from Studio. It just shows you how you can publish a script as a web service. So first, what you do is you typically create the script using Excel. It's usually the recommended way, because then you can very easily test it. And well, if it's very simple, you don't have to go through via Excel, but many times it's a good practice to use that, and then you can really verify that it's working. And once it's ready, then you can change the data source from Excel to web form or XML. So it's basically XML format. And once you have done that, you can go here and press publish as web service. And when you've done that, you go through the web service wizard, which is it's not very complex. It's just a few things you have to fill in. You provide the name of the web service. You can provide some additional options, some description and stuff like that. And the important thing here is that then you need to bind it to a specific SAP system, because every web service is connected to a specific SAP system. And then you provide the SAP security option. So you define who is executing this web service. So you have like two options here. You can indicate that we're using the delegate option, or then we use a system account. If you're using the delegate option, it means that the person who is actually invoking the web service, so that would be the Windows Active Directory, that Windows domain user, that person is calling the web service. And then if we are using the delegate option, it means that that person is accessing SAP. So if we have a query web service and that person is calling a web service with the delegate option, it means that that person's security is in place. So all of that security applies that you have in SAP. You also have the option to use like a system account, and this is especially in cases maybe you're building some kind of a server software or server routines, then you might want to use a system account. So it's like a predefined account which is then accessing SAP. And I will show you an example of executing a web service here in the next demo. And okay, this is just the last slide of the generate or the publishing. So the last page, you just get the web service URL, and then you can use it from wherever you need to do it. So let's show a very quick demo of a web service execution. And I have here in my command line, I have a small script now which is calling the web service. It's actually a PowerShell script. Of course, it could be then anything really which is calling that. And I have I'm reading some data from SAP, and let's see, I'll type in the name of that script, and I have to provide here name of the customers that I want to fetch. So let's take just customers starting with letter S, and then I have an option in my script to list the data. So here we're just calling that script, and it's directly executing the web service, and then we get the result on the form or in the screen. So what is important here is, of course, that in this case, when I'm now running this, then we're not using Excel, and we are not using Studio. We're not using Winshuttle in that way, in any way. So we're just calling this web service. So I don't need to have anything special on this workstation to execute this. I have a second. Let's run it one more time, and let's put for example, starting with E, and send it as an email. So just to show you a little bit, I get a little bit more data than is shown in this list. I get more columns, and in my script, I now have an option also to send the result as an email. But of course, it depends on completely your requirement, how you want to use this web service. It's just a basic example of that, and I should now get an email. Okay, so I get a customer list, and it says customers starting with E, and I should get a list here of those customers. So that's from our SAP system, so it doesn't make a lot of sense, but you should get the idea. And in the same way as I'm running this web service, I could also run any web service that is calling a SAP transaction. It would be exactly the same thing. And yeah, so that completes that demo. And let's go one more time back to the presentation. And let's jump to the last topic or the last scenario. So in the last scenario, we will be talking about workflow integration in a foundation environment. So those Winshuttle customers who have Winshuttle Foundation, they typically have it because they want to build Winshuttle workflows. And just briefly about the Winshuttle workflows, I will not be talking a lot about these because we have other presentations where we are presenting the basic functions of our products. But just to briefly remind you here that Winshuttle workflow is, there are two types of Winshuttle workflows. There is the web form workflow, which means that we're building a workflow which is completely web form based. Data is entered in web forms, and typically you have different people, different teams of users who are part of the workflow. You have maybe some approval steps, and typically these workflows, they connect to SAP at some point, maybe in the beginning or maybe in every step or whatever. So you have Excel transaction scripts, and you can validate those. Equally, you can validate the information here on these web forms. So these web forms are actually using the web services that I just showed you earlier. So technically it's using web service to connect to SAP. So for example, if you have a transaction script, you can use that web service to validate information or to actually save the information. It's just a parameter indicating what you want to do. So the web form workflow is one, and then we also have the Excel workflow, which is slightly different because in that case, all the data is entered in an Excel file, and the workflow starts by uploading an Excel file or by triggering a workflow from the Excel file. So it's a slightly different scenario in that case because it's something you would use only in real mass uploads, and probably if you want to approve a big Excel file, then you could build your custom workflow. But most of our customers, they are building more web form workflows because that provides in a way, or there are much more use cases for that. And also, if you have like repeating data, you have some kind of mass information, you can still also do that on your web forms. But let's say we're talking about thousands or tens of thousands of rows of data, then it's not usually a very good idea to put that in a web form. So then it's probably a better idea to have it in Excel. So typically the workflows are connected to SAP, but the Winshuttle workflow is completely a generic workflow, so it can integrate with a lot of other things. You could even build your workflow without connecting to any external data. It could be all just a web form where you enter the data there, maybe have it routed to different people for approval or complementing the data and so forth. But Winshuttle workflow, you can build a workflow which is using data from databases or using web services for communication or for integration. It can connect to different ways to SharePoint, or you can use scripts or other applications. to connect to different data sources. So you have a very you have a lot of options here, and the reason I'm mentioning this is that if we're thinking about, for example, an RPA solution, it means that probably some of the processes that you're automating, probably some of those are things that you can automate also with the Winshuttle workflow, especially if it's something which is integrated with SAP or updating SAP data, or maybe things that have to do with approvals and team approvals, for example, and stuff like that. Those are things that are very powerful in the Winshuttle workflow environment, and might be better than the RPA solution in some cases. And on the other hand, you could also use, for example, an RPA process to trigger a Winshuttle workflow, because you can start workflow processes by executing a web service and providing some parameters to that. So that's one option, and one additional option could be that maybe some of the tasks that you are performing in the Winshuttle workflow, maybe some of the tasks are things that you want to instead automate or semi-automate or whatever with an RPA process. So there is a lot of possibilities here. We have seen that effectively all of the Winshuttle workflow customers, they have some kind of need to automate the process initiation, so to starting new process instances, because they don't want to, typically they don't want users to have to manually start a workflow process. Okay, sometimes it may be that you have to manually start it if you don't have any input anywhere to decide when you want to start the process, but in most cases there is some kind of rule or some kind of status or trigger that can be used to trigger a new workflow process to start. So one example here, or one typical use, is that you have something in SAP which triggers the workflow. So you have some new items or some items in SAP in a specific status which are triggering the workflow to start. You could have information in SharePoint lists, so something happening in a SharePoint, you get a new item there, and that should trigger a new workflow instance. You could do that as well. Maybe you have something in a database, or maybe you just have something happening in your application, and you could, from that application, invoke a new Winshuttle workflow process, provide some parameters, and just start the process. So there are a lot of options here as well, and I have some example here. Here is one customer example, which is they are using Winshuttle for material creation process, and the way it works is that they are using an external PLM system. So they enter the basic material information from there, and this PLM system then generates like skeleton materials into SAP. So it's just the very start of the material information, and when these entries appear in SAP, then that will automatically trigger a Winshuttle workflow to be started, a new workflow process for each new material. So this is implemented by we have like a polling system which checks SAP every now and then. I think it's currently set to check every 15 minutes or something like that. It doesn't matter how often we cannot check it very often if we need it. And then if it finds a new material, it will then start a new workflow instance with some parameters, material parameters, and then there will be a workflow started, and there will be tasks for lots of different teams, for the sales team, warehouse team, purchasing, planning, quality, and so forth. So you have different teams will be then actually complementing the data and finalizing the material creation. So they will then be performing the actual data entry into SAP through the web forms. Another example of starting the workflow processes is that we have a customer where vendor information is provided in SharePoint Online. So it's just the very basic vendor details, some names and some basic data. And this is a form which has nothing to do with Winshuttle. It's just a Microsoft form. But what happens then is that there's like a separate Polar service or Polar application which checks this SharePoint Online list on a regular basis, and then if there's a new item, it will trigger a Winshuttle workflow to occur, and then you have the actual vendor creation SAP workflow started based on information in the SharePoint cloud. So this is quite a nice solution also because you don't need to have any software installed in the cloud. It's just reading a SharePoint list and reading content from there, and that's enough to trigger that workflow. And the last thing here is that in some cases there are situations where the Winshuttle workflow, there is a step in the workflow that we don't want to automate with Winshuttle workflow. It might be something which is already automated to some extent, or there is some very special knowledge, or there's stuff that customers see that there is no main benefit of putting that into a web form, basically. It may be something that is very difficult to implement, or it might be something that is not executed in every workflow instance or something like that. But here is one example of a customer that creating materials again, and the bill of material process. That's something that was it was actually also created by the external PLM system. So then instead of having that as part of the Winshuttle workflow, what was implemented was just like a wait node in the Winshuttle workflow, and it's then waiting for that bill of material to be created in SAP. So this means that despite the fact that the task is not within the Winshuttle workflow, it is still controlled by the workflow, or the workflow is affected by the task. So automatically, when the bill of material has been created, then this workflow will continue again. So it's kind of integrated, but there is no user interface integration between the actual action. So this is also something that we have seen a lot of different cases where you have a need for something like this, and it's a nice thing because if you're looking at a very big process and you see that you have a lot of tasks, and maybe you don't want to implement all the tasks right now. What you could do is just define it as an external task like this, so you don't implement it as the first thing. Maybe in the second phase of the implementation project. So it gives you some possibilities to skip some things maybe in the beginning, or skip some things also later, but you have additional options here. Okay, and in this the last demo, it's also a very quick demo here, and in this case I'm demonstrating the like the SharePoint Online trigger, or I have a case where in the SharePoint Online I have a new hire form, a very simple form, which is has nothing to do with Winshuttle. It's just a Microsoft form, and then when that has been entered, then it's been checked every now and then it's triggering an actual workflow process to be started within the Winshuttle workflow environment. So then there will be some HR manager or whoever who gets some email, and they get a task, and they can then complement the information and store the information into SAP finally. So I'll just go briefly to that demo, and I have here, let's see, we have just a second. I have two windows open here now. I have one workflow window here, and there's no tasks for me here yet. This is our internal server here at ADSOTECH. You can see that that's my Firefox browser here, and then I have in my Internet Explorer, I have opened Office 365 here, and I can from here now trigger new hire entries. So I'm opening a new form here, and it should open the new hire form for me, and I can here now enter some data. I can enter the last name and something else. Let's see, James. I can't spell it. Jesus, yeah, like that. Okay, mail, and I just put something here, date born or something like that, and then I'll submit that request. So I'm submitting a request, and I just wanted to quickly be sent, because we have to wait a little bit here for this something to happen. And you can now, it was now sent or submitted, and we have a new entry here in this list. You can see that the status is initial, which indicates that this is a new person or in a new status. It has not been started yet in the Winshuttle side. So if I just refresh this a little bit, okay, actually it just happened to go right away. So it went very fast, and so we can see here now. Okay, just go back here. We can see that it started here, and it actually also returned the process ID here. And this now means that this James Bond request has been sent to the Winshuttle workflow. So if I now refresh this, I have here in my task list, I have a new hire details, and this is the actual SAP Winshuttle workflow now. I open that task, and what I should have here now is I should have the information passed over from the SharePoint Online, and it's now here in the Winshuttle workflow side. So now I could go on and continue with this actual SAP workflow, complement some data, maybe send it to someone for approval, and send it to SAP and so forth. So that was just to demonstrate that we can trigger workflow instances, for example, from a SharePoint list like that. Okay, so that's actually all from my side.
Thanks.
Are you Tuomas still there?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Let's just share this. Again, let me know when you see my screen.
Yeah, we see a summary screen. Yep.
Yeah. This is just to give you summary what we just saw. So I guess you knew this, but I know that you feel enforced and that you can automate a lot of things with Winshuttle. And I hope you study these ways to perhaps increase the automation level in your processes with Winshuttle. But of course, as you saw, you need to be perhaps a bit more IT savvy to actually accomplish that. But you have and you will need some other automation tools also, especially to touch other systems than SAP. We can offer you a lot of those processes, the robust remote function calls to SAP, queries. If you need to fetch the data to your process, we can do that quite easily. I think you will save time if you collect the data and just run them as a mass upload to SAP. And we have very good error handling, as you know, and you can utilize that also. So please consider case by case what would be the easiest and the best way you to do the SAP integration in your automation. It might be even the method provided by the barebone RPI if it's simple read from SAP. If you are using the server, you have a lot more possibilities. Like Jan just scratched a surface. So if you have questions for him, just let him know. But we give you the basic functionality, workflow, and interactive forms, and you can enhance that data, enhance those things by triggering events and so on. And remember that we can also integrate and utilize the third-party forms and the data sources in the Winshuttle workflow. Now it's good time to type questions if you have any from Jan about Winshuttle integration possibilities. And I'll give you 2-minute introductions to dpros. Now you can still type questions. And the key differentiator between dpros and Winshuttle is that dpros is inside the SAP. As a opposite, when we use Winshuttle, we said that we do everything outside of the SAP. And the value that dpros might bring you is that it makes very easy to use and very easy to access a lot of native things in the SAP, like queries, RV reports, eDoc data, and standard SAP change logs. Just to give you an example, you could make a report of inactive SAP users. You just run a normal SAP query and send the data to those persons that need to shut down to inactive accounts. Or you could go and see if somebody has changed material master data or your accounts master data, and publish that information to your auditor, so he can be compliant, more easily compliant with reporting requirements. And the last example, we can search the failed eDocs for you and automatically enhance the information about the error and send to your operators that are responsible of solving eDoc problems. So this is dpros. It makes very easy to use data inside SAP, and like it might make it easy, for example, to change logs that you might sometimes use external service to create audit trail. Now you can just use the audit trail that is provided natively by the SAP. Okay, that was all from us. We've been recorded this, and we will make this possible for the download. But I will also send you all the files we have here, so it might be even easier to just take the material and contact us. We talked about these possibilities in live customer meeting just before we started this webinar, and I think it's much better way to discuss about possibilities than just running this webinar. And I encourage you to reach us and really talk about your needs, and we can see that if we can spar you to utilize Winshuttle better than you do today. Okay, I'm shutting this down, this webinar, if you don't have any more questions. And please Google DPROS or find it from our supplier site if you want to know more. Okay, take care. Thank you for your time. I hope you had ideas from this webinar.